We're very excited to welcome Lawrence Tyson to In the Queue. Lawrence, thanks so much for taking valuable time out of your day to join us. I know how busy you are, and probably I don't have any idea how busy you are, but we welcome you in the queue. And let's give our audience a little bit of background. We'll go over some of the things, as I just mentioned. You created your own company, but you've been at this since a very young age. Not that you're all that old now. You're very successful at a relatively young age, but you started at 14 in the digital world, the digital business. Is that correct?
Right, yes, you can say that. So 14 is the age where I got my first payment online. So I think that's the right measurement for when it really started. So truthfully, it's been a good decade that I've been in this game, so to speak. But I do want to be very transparent with that as well. There has been a gap in between where I wasn't really actively doing things. But when I
Sure.
started at that age, I was in this online world and I was creative. I was making YouTube videos. I was doing these type of activities that did lead me to my first payment online. So yes, that's
Sure.
really the starting point.
Yeah, you were, I mean, technically a professional if you got paid for doing it. So you started young, but you've been around it, whether you were active or not, you've been around it. Did that give you perspective now, having started at such a young age?
I do think so. And that's actually very interesting to zoom into that because
Mhm.
I think that experience does really help. And you don't necessarily need to be extremely professional within one area. Just having a little bit of knowledge in various things is so helpful. Like you can see this right now, specifically with AI, right? It's such an obvious topic to talk about. But what I recognize as well is that when I started, playing video games online and just being experimental, so to speak, online, which included this YouTube, which is this creative thing and just making content, it gave me like a touch of various things. Like how do I make thumbnails? What's the graphic? How do I edit videos? And early on, I experienced a lot of these different type of skill sets. And I think that has absolutely allowed me to do so much more because right now I'm in a stage where I'm much more focused on management and managing my team with different roles and different responsibilities. But I know all of these things too. And there's things that I've learned early on that I'm still applying to this day. So I guess, yeah, it's only good, right? If you have more experience, so to speak. And I think
Yeah.
being early in that specific thing has definitely helped from that perspective.
Tell us about your company if people are just learning about you. Breathpage,
Right.
um, it is a very successful company already, and um, but tell us about it, why you started it, and what you do.
Right. So starting it has been it's such a big journey. So it started out as a student in college where I officially registered the business being in college. And then eventually I pursued the business full time and decided to quit college. And here we are. So that's essentially the starting point. And for me, a big reason essentially in this whole entrepreneurial gap has been to pursue that online venture even more. So even just looking back and reflecting as I'm saying this, where I started out at a young age to essentially experiment these different things online and just always spending a lot of time online as well. That has been a big drive for me. I wanted to be in a position where I could make money online. Like that was simply the main goal, and it still is. So that's to me became a very clear point of I need to have my own company and I need to do something online. That was essentially the initial roadmap that I ended up building off from. Right now we've been developed so much more than what it used to be. So I used to personally start out making websites. That has been the core. And it's really still a core activity of what we do, but it's so much more. So these days we're essentially operating as the right-hand team for businesses and entrepreneurs, and we essentially do ecosystem management. So we have our own software platform, and on top of that, you provide services, which is the website, it's the emails, it's the blogging, it's community management. So we're really more strategizing and implementing and supporting for businesses on that front. And I've been very active as well in the media PR industry, specifically for the last 2 years. So yeah, the day to day is essentially both of that and just putting in the work and keep growing. So
You know, I was struck by your focus on websites because I speak to a lot of companies and a lot of them wonder if the website is over, really since social media,
Mm,
right? And LinkedIn and Instagram and all
right.
of the different opportunities, TikTok, right? There are a lot of successful individuals out there, but companies wonder now, do I need a website? And what is your answer to that?
I think it's a given almost. Like it absolutely is needed because it does allow you to have so much more of a formal presence, like an actually mature business, right? Because even when you look at the AI age of the quick generation, the generative AI, you can create a lot of things. But truthfully, it's more about supporting and actually having the infrastructure of your business. I personally believe that when you utilize a website in the most way, it actually does support your business from all sides, specifically in this online context, because it can help you with the sales and the marketing, a bit of operations, and especially if you have a software where you also have your contacts in one place and you can send the emails from one place, it does really allow you to manage your whole ecosystem. So to me, that really makes the most sense because it's not just about getting a page online. I can go to so many of these tools right now, and of course, in a few years, they'll be so much better and you can quickly generate stuff. But what does that truly put on the table? Like, what infrastructure is behind that? And I think that's very critical because it needs to actually support your business, right? If you can have places where people transact on your website or perhaps they inquire just for feeding into that transaction later on of the website, whatever that looks like, it does really help. Also, looking into the foreseeable future, we can expect that a lot of us entrepreneurs, companies will have our own type of AI technology, so to speak. We're all essentially merging into being a technology company, regardless of what industry you're in. So, just as having your website as your home central point, people would essentially have some sort of, you know, AI agent that is their own. And I believe that's somewhat likely going to be similar to like your website domain. It's still going to be your home base. Perhaps the whole interaction and the process is different, but yeah, to me that is really critical. And I just believe as well, just from straightforward value, it changes the conversations you're having. If you have that world-class presence behind you, it just changes the way people perceive you. And if you just utilize it in the right way, it can really be a powerful marketing machine. So yeah, of course I'm a little bit biased, but to me it's an absolute yes. So
Lawrence Tyson is our guest, and he is the founder of Breathage. This is Europe's leading website agency. Um, what differences do you see, Lawrence, if any, between European businesses and American businesses or businesses around the world?
right.
Take your pick. What is, as far as the approach to web branding, websites, social media, from your perspective, working with over 150 companies and 400 plus websites you've helped design and launch. So that's a lot of perspective. Are there differences in the way companies approach their online presence?
There absolutely are, but fundamentally, there's a lot of evergreen concepts. So I think that's really the true answer. However, if you do want to specifically look at the differences, there is. I think the American culture is much more embracing to the entrepreneurial spirit. It's almost natural as an American to start your company. That's kind of the impression I get, right? So I think naturally it's just much more focused on the conversion, whereas in Europe, people tend to be less direct with transactions, if that makes sense. Even if you look at working with clients from US versus Europe, I always say this thing, and I don't know where I got it, but sometime somebody said it, which is basically that in America they understand that you have to spend money to make money, and it's really true. Whereas most likely behind in comparison to in America on any type of fields, whether that's marketing, social media, advertise spending, because I guess that's just more of a stronger side in the US. So yeah, there's absolutely differences to it. I don't think it's really that black and gray. I don't really think it's that binary of this is what one party does and the other one does this. But there's naturally differences. I think what mainly matters is just the evergreen part of it, right? And what do you as a company, as an entrepreneur specifically provide that's relevant everywhere? And I personally like to work with a lot of people from a lot of countries, from a lot of industries. I like that. I
Mhm.
feel like it allows me to test myself out, to apply my skill set within that industry, within another country. And yeah, I think regardless of what your foundation is, you can do that as well because there's a lot of value in specifically optimizing for a niche-based company, and that absolutely works amazing. But to me, that's more a part of it. I wouldn't want my company to specifically be established on one thing because I know there's so much other things we can do and more companies and more industries
Right.
that we can help. So to me, if there's specifically an industry, that's more like a marketing campaign rather than my whole business strategy.
What are some mistakes that companies make with their websites?
Right. So to me, it's a little bit hard to only think about the website. I have to think
Mhm.
more about the broader concept. But
Yeah.
looking at that, it's really just not utilizing it the most. There's so many of simple things you can do that just really bring out the most. So, for example, it's very natural. I know I had this in this conversation with you as well, where Linktree is mentioned up, right? Like you can with any website builder create another page and make buttons for links and put that in your link in bio. And that really isn't that significant, but it's like a clean professional way to have a page on your website with all of your links, right?
Mm.
So it's like there's very small nuances like this, which are just great to implement. But the core thing, which I see, is that people don't rely on their website to actually work for them. When you do marketing, when you have different channels, so perhaps you do your Instagram and your LinkedIn and whatever that could look like, you want to always look at it from an ecosystem perspective. You want to see where are people actually going from the attention to the interaction, and then later on actually do the transaction. And you want to essentially organize all of that, especially if you have a higher scale of attention. So a website is still a great medium to convert all of those people. So there's a lot of people who don't really utilize it that much. And the more things you do early on, the more valuable it's going to be for you. So the sooner you start building your email list, the better it is, right? So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's really what comes to mind first.
But you brought up a good point. So the website is a part of the puzzle, but it's not your only strategy. And you can't just put out a site, no matter how good it is, and let that be your only strategy, right?
Completely, yes. Because I always say to people as well, if you just get the website, it's not going to do anything for you. That's the simple truth. And that's with everything the same case. You have to utilize it and you have to actually make
Mm.
sure that you put it to use. But that's why it is very powerful to have it in a place where it does play a central role. If it actually allows you to create these pages and funnels where it actually converts, it could be a central piece of your business, right? Like if you look at, for example, e-commerce, their site is their whole business. That's literally their business model. So yeah,
You call it an ecosystem, right? So you're
right.
developing an ecosystem. These tools add to it, but you design it from the ground up, right? So for a business, you're looking at all aspects of how they are presenting themselves. Obviously, industry driven, right? So as you just said, if you're e-commerce, you're going to focus on that website and driving customers there. But for other industries and other businesses and maybe individuals who have websites, I'm thinking doctors, lawyers, there's a wide
Mhm.
range of people who are trying to generate customers. So it's got to be a big picture initially. How do you organize all that? And you must help companies do that. So there's a lot to do. It's not as easy
Yes.
as you just whip up a web page and you're in business. I mean, there's a lot of organization to do, right?
Absolutely, yes. And it really comes down to putting that into place. I think that's the first step because the truth is
Mm.
there's not one activity, right? And that's what you notice a lot when especially when you speak and listen to marketers because
Mm.
everybody has their own framework or their own solution or their whatever it is. And all of these things work, right? You can do advertising specifically on Instagram, or you can do TikTok commerce, or you can do Google ads, you can do cold outreach, you can A/B split test your funnels, you can do UGC, all of these things. Like it's almost overwhelming the amount of things you can do that people promote and all of that.
Yeah.
And all of these individual things, they do work. Like all of that could work. You can get so many results with cold email or with ads or with Instagram Reels. But the truth is that it's never one solution. That's just one system in your whole business. And that's the conversation I'm always having with everyone because it's not just about that one solution that you should try to implement and that's gonna, be the whole piece of your business. You cannot rely on that. You have to see what are all these different things and how does that align together. And I worked out the framework, which is essentially the ecosystem of attention, interaction, and transaction. It's essentially a combination of different type of resources and conclusions that I've made myself and just put it in that helicopter view.
Hmm.
And I believe those three layers is truly what it is because quickly zooming into that, if you look at attention, you can have different social media accounts. It doesn't mean that your whole business has to rely on your Instagram page. It could be a main vehicle, but there's all these different type of inputs. So you and every client is different, right? So some people may have a lot of podcasts, or some people have their own podcasts like yourself. Some people have a lot of webinars they're doing, or they're testing a lot of events. So there's always varieties based on the client. But outlining these different attention points is so helpful because it shows you what are these different type of channels that we have. And then what is that step in between to get them from actually just looking at you, giving you attention to interacting with your brand. And that could be various things. So popular things, which is kind of like a usual answer, is like an ebook, it's a
Hmm.
webinar where they actually go through it. It's maybe like a low ticket product of like a $20 or whatever, just on a lower type tier of thing. But getting people from, giving you attention to interacting with you, that's always a key step. For other people, it's an email list. So it could vary, right? But
Yeah.
that makes so much sense because what you've done then already is okay, we have these different channels where people give me attention. Where does that go? What is the next step? And then the second step after that, which is the third layer essentially, is the transactions. And this is
Yes.
also nuanced because as companies, as entrepreneurs, it's very natural that you have multiple offers. Maybe someone
Hmm.
does coaching, but they also have some products that or some community that they go through. Maybe a company provides a type of consulting with three different packages or a software company with multiple tiers. So even in the transaction part alone, there's different tiers. Maybe there's a value ladder that people ascend to where they start in one way and then they upsell and all of that stuff. So there's always nuances. There's always so much happening. And to me, being able to outline and have like a big bird view overview of all of that, that's kind of where the magic happens. And I'm saying that very purposely because there is no magic, right? Like we cannot rely on some sort of magic bullet. But if we do bringing that much clarity, it is, significantly going to help you anything that you do because any hire, any marketing strategy, whatever you have to do, it can always reference to that. And then it will make a lot of sense and how it actually plays a role in your company. So,
Lawrence Tyson is our guest. You know what I like so much, Lawrence? And if you go to breathpage.com, you learn that this is not a overnight get rich quick. There's so many people online who, you know, brand themselves as these experts, but it's a one, like do an ebook and you'll get millions of views and sales. And it is not easy. You're coming at it as a real business, as someone who has built systems and understands that it's not just a quick 10-minute setup and you're on your way. You've got to look at things that you've done already. So that's the next question I want to ask you for listeners, business owners. It might be one individual or it might be a larger business. Where should they start? They may
mm,
have done a lot of these things, right, and plugged in a lot of tools. And we're going to talk about AI tools in a minute too. Of course, in the queue, we've got to do that. But where would you start somebody? Maybe when you're working with a company, where do you start? What do you look at?
yes. So everybody starts from a different position. So it depends where you are at currently because that will identify what it is that you're really doing. I would still go back and reference to that ecosystem map that I mentioned, right? But you just have to fill in what is it for you. Maybe the only thing that you're doing right now is you having an Instagram account, which just works really well. So maybe that could be your main point, which we know that is the attention you currently have.
Hmm.
Perhaps you say, okay, well, I have this amazing offer for helping people with their accounting, but I don't really do any marketing or I don't really do any type of sales. So you're always going to reference to see where what is the starting point? What are these elements that you have? Then what I like to do to essentially identify what works is because, generally speaking, in business, you have different departments, right? You need to do your marketing and your sales and your fulfillment and the operations. As a core, those are like the main four things. So if you are really starting out or you really need to strengthen one thing specifically, I would always look at what has worked. And this is a
Mhm.
bit difficult to identify, but that's where market research comes into play. Now, personally, what I experience when you do some sort of marketing research is it's very difficult to do that if you're actually starting out because you're just going off your IDs. Like I went through courses and I went to all of these programs where they say, okay, first identify your top 100 clients and,
Mhm.
write out the pain points. And I always struggle to do that. I just really had to get it going and then afterwards get that, stuff sorted out, so to speak. But effectively doing market research can be very simple. And the more interactions you have, the easier that's going to be. So I would always look at what is the current client base, what are several questions that you can ask them to just get a good insight, because that's truly
Mhm.
what matters the most. So let's say you interview, maybe if it's even three clients, or it could be 300. But if you
Mhm.
interview them, you have a set few of questions. You can actually look at that data. What are these commonalities that we have? Is there a specific match in the profile of the people? Are there certain answers that they give that are recurring? Because that will allow you to identify what are angles that we can, use in the messaging online. What are the type of people that we can try to find and replicate elsewhere? So yeah, I will always look at what do you have, what are elements you have, and then how do you essentially replicate that and expand upon it, and then
Mhm.
build system per system. So don't try to really overdo it. You need to essentially get to a place where you do a lot, but first start building system per system, getting that to work, and then moving on to the next part.
What about somebody starting brand new, has never been in business before, but wants to start? In some cases, that may be better because they haven't made any mistakes or gone down any wrong paths. What advice would you have for people today in this technically advanced environment who want to start a digital business or online or really any kind of business at
Mhm.
all?
Yeah, it's interesting because truthfully, even right now and 2 years ago is so much different. And that's a little
Mm.
bit weird to say, but that's the reality. So what I think is the most important there is just to focus on building a lot of interactions. I really think that's the most important because it's very natural. I think that's how human beings are wired. You want to see shortcuts. You want to essentially get something easy. So if you're coming across, assumingly you have some sort of idea of direction or how you want to go about it, you're gonna most likely see a lot of content and people about entrepreneurial conversations, or you're going to get a lot of insights. And
Mm.
then you're going to see, okay, I should make Instagram videos or I should send cold emails. And you're very easily going to go to a position where you want to optimize too much. If you really start out, you should focus on those interactions. Like, what are one-on-one conversations you can have on a daily basis? Like, who can you reach out to in your existing network and, reach out to them and talk about your ideas and get their ideas and get their feedback. At the same time, I think you should start very early on building your network as well. Like, I
Mm.
say that this to people as well. Like, there's still many people you come across who aren't on LinkedIn. Like, for example, I speak sometimes with younger people, like some students, and I'm like, bro, like you need to set up your LinkedIn account. You need to do that. Like it's going to be helpful. So it depends how and what, but early on, just getting into the position where you're starting to make interactions and you're also building your presence, which doesn't mean you need on day one make a vlog and make videos, but just maybe writing an update here and there, creating a
Mhm.
professional profile, just sharing a little bit about what you do. It's going to help build its presence because eventually the more you have of it, the better, right? So
Yeah, sounds like if you start with a good foundation and you build upon it each day, that's going to be the best path. It sounds like what you're saying.
yes, it absolutely is because that consistency is very key and it's difficult to not do that, right? It's very easy to just try something and then after a month don't do it, but even the most simplistic actions, if you are able to compound that, it does really help. So
Let's talk about AI. I can't, I mean, we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but let's talk. First of all, what is your thought? You didn't quite grow up with AI, but you're young enough to know, but old enough to know the difference when there wasn't really an AI presence
Right.
online, right? But now you've got it, and we've got all these tools coming at us 1,000 miles an hour. It can be overwhelming. What's your overall thought of AI, first of all? And then what about all of these tools coming at us, and what are your thoughts about them?
Yes, well, I think you highlighted the key thing. It is really overwhelming. It really is. I'm looking from my position and I'm daily coming across all these different type of implementations and new
Yeah,
businesses that I come across and all these different type of tools. And I personally get very overwhelmed when I see like, whoa, there's so much I feel behind on. Like I need to do so much more. And I know from a very realistic standpoint that I'm much more ahead of most people, so to speak.
right.
Even if you, I'm not sure where that graph was published, but there was some sort of graph that demonstrated that out of the current population, there's such a tiny percentage that actually is using these AI tools. So I
Right.
know I'm very realistic about that. It's my day to day. Like I'm speaking with business owners, I'm interacting online, so I see these things all day. But there's so many people, the majority of every human being alive, who isn't doing that, who is still not really aware of what even a chat GPT is. That's
No.
it exists. So to me, it's something where I personally feel behind. But what's really happening is I think the world is completely changing as it has ever been. I don't think anything is really similar. Traditional concepts of any industry is going to be rapidly different. So we are truly in a time where everything is completely going to be different. I think that's really the case. For me, the way
Yes.
I look at it, I think what I want to do is just being able to keep that market opportunity for implementation. And I think there's a lot of room in being that right-hand team for people because you can always be a reliable person. More companies are starting to be much more lean. People don't really need that much staff anymore. So you can fill up a lot of spots by just being a
Mhm.
key provider and just being all-compassing as well. So, it is really overwhelming. I think that's such a conclusion to take from it. But yeah,
Yeah,
I think yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I know you talk about AI tools that are out there. You use many of them, a lot of them. I think a lot of business people and listeners, employees are, touching these AI tools, whether they know it or not. Many tools are
Mhm.
out there. They're kind of adding AI capabilities, and it might be as simple as Copilot on your email or your Word documents, or
Yep.
like Chat GPT, which gets a lot of publicity, but there's so many folks developing on it now. Not sure where we'll be in even 12 months from now with all of the different tools, but I guess what would your advice be to business owners looking at all of these AI tools? How do you pick and choose? What would you do?
Yes, there are a lot of different type of tools, and all of them are great. So I personally could give some advice on what tools are I like. I've most likely spent a lot of hours with all of them. I've used Gemini, Grok, Perplexity, ChatGPT, Cloud. Those are the core ones, and I've definitely
Yeah.
think I spent like 100 hours with each of them for sure. So I've definitely got my fair share of experience and insights. But what's going to be the most helpful is if you have organizational structure and insights into what is this that you need to do outside of the AI, because you have so much potential now to implement to advanced systems that you're using, but if you aren't able to properly document that or aren't really in a position where you can create your SOPs and you are able to, put it in simple writing, it's going to be very difficult for you to use an AI tool because if you're just prompting it without context, it's not that amazing. You could argue that these systems aren't even that great because all they do is just give you some memory. They aren't really that advanced yet, although it's very impressive. Realistically, that's
Mhm.
where we are. So it will be completely different in X amount of time. But if you are able to implement it part by part, that's going to be the most helpful. If you can look at, okay, I'm doing this particular thing for sales or for fulfillment or for marketing, what is one element out of that that I could assist or have AI help me with or completely
Mm.
replace or automate. Because if you do it that way and you just focus on expanding and expanding with the different systems and the different tools, then you're actually gradually making process. And I think that's needed because it's very easy to get distracted. There's so many different, tools that make it overwhelming to say, oh, I need to work on this tomorrow, and in 3 days from now, I have to do something else. But if you just
Something right.
stick to expanding and advancing these different type of systems you already have, it's going to allow you to actually get the experience and to test and to advance. So to me, that's most important. Tools, there's so many of them. The companies behind them are enormous. These are
Yeah.
massive companies. So none of them are truly bad, right? Because you're talking about billion-dollar companies who sure know what they're doing. That being said, I would advise people to start with not directly ChatGPT. I actually think tools like a Perplexity is very underrated
Hmm.
because Perplexity is very strong in their web search. And for a lot of use cases of the people I know and that I'm speaking with, they don't need heavy computing or mathematical type of implementations, which something like a Grok is amazing. If you look at Grok from X Twitter,
Yes.
they're the best for coding. And I've used Grok so much. I really did. And I love it.
Yeah.
And they're also much better at diving into the internet with sensor type of topics. But you might be better off with using a cloud because it's much more, optimized for businesses rather than ChatGPT, which is at this point becoming a little bit generic, but still it's a massive company.
Yeah.
Gemini is super good as well because Gemini is the Google ecosystem. Like it used to be something where nobody really liked it, but then it advancedly changed. And I think these positions these companies have is that they know that. They know that, well, we have all of this data. We don't have to worry about catching the trend of being the first AI tool because we will be dominating this for sure. So, yeah, a lot of these tools are great, but you just have to creatively think about how you can leverage them and then step by step move forward.
But get started. That is such good advice, and thank you for giving details and advice. That's so helpful, Lawrence. For our listeners who want to stay in touch with you, follow you, learn more about what you have to offer, how do they do that? How can they stay in touch with you?
Right. So the absolute best way is to always check on my website. That's where all my information is central. So it's my full name.com, laurenstyson.com. That being said, if you have, a specific use case, I'm always open to optimizing for interactions. So I'm very eager to chat with people. That being said, there are several resources that I have as well, so people could look into that. We're doing power audits where we help people analyze their positioning and their branding. We have a free growth blueprint, which is a collection of several resources that are very helpful for businesses to just implement several things for organizing and marketing. So yeah, there's a lot of resources. I'm active on most socials, so I'm pretty much everywhere. I'm easy to find purposely. So yeah, you can look
That's
up my
awesome.
name and you should find me anywhere.
We'll find you, and we'll of course put some links in the show notes and help our listeners to connect with you. Lawrence Tyson, breathpage.com. Amazing story from a young man to a still young man, but very successful in business. And thank you for helping our audience to get smarter and do better in their individual businesses and in other things that they want to do. We appreciate you being so generous with your time, Lawrence.
Absolutely. It was a great pleasure and I enjoyed the conversation.